You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
All right, everybody, welcome to another fantastic live stream here with History with Waffles. And today we got a real special treat here with Robert Lee Hodge. I would like to welcome him to the channel. Robert, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So Robert here started researching his ancestors a long time ago when he was just a young man. And he ended up memorizing the Dewey Decimal System before he could even read. It gets into reenacting in 1981, and along the way he ends up getting a Congressional Arts Award. He raised a lot of money for preservation. He's been on many different videos, History Channel and such, and he's also written a lot of articles about the Civil War, on top of doing a lot of research about his own family as well. And of course, everybody remembers the book Confederates in the Attic, where he is one of the central characters in that book. Where Mr. Horowitz tells a real decent story along the way about learning about the types of reenactors. One of my particular favorite stories coming out of that book is the very beginning when he talks about the rolling over left and right and spooning in that situation. Why don't you give us a little bit of maybe how you got started? We'll talk about that first, and then we'll get into the stories in that book.
Oh, yeah, it started into the Civil War in reenacting or Civil War?
Just your interest in the topic itself.
Yeah, I think part of it, has to do with who I'm named after. My brother suggested I be named after Robert E. Lee. He had been influenced by the Centennial, and I was born in '67, and my older brothers experienced the Centennial a little bit as youngsters. And they had the hand-me-down figurines, the blue and gray set that Marx, I think, had and Sears carried for a while. A lot of people will be familiar with those, and people that have heard my my evolution of Civil War, have heard this story before. But it was those figurines, and especially the homespun-looking Confederates with the bedrolls and the slouch hats and the pointed beards and the blouse trousers. They look like homespun citizen soldiers, kind of more like Minutemen in a lot of ways, as opposed to military. The federal look is a different look, but that's just the generalization as a kid. But I gravitated towards the Rebs because of visuals, because of aesthetics, military aesthetics, and then knowing that the guy I was named after led many of those homespun citizen soldiers. That romanticism, I got into, even though I grew up in John Brown country in Northeast Ohio. Went to James A. Garfield Elementary School, wore a Confederate kepi in my first grade picture. But the Rebs, the Confederates, were always the bias. I always have had the utmost respect for federal soldiers just in general. I don't want to judge dead people. I think that's a dangerous thing people do today. But the bias was always for the Confederates. My dad was from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and grew up pre-automobile and fought in the Philippines and fought the Japanese. And I recorded 25 hours of those things. But he was very 19th century. They had mules. They didn't have many horses even. They had mules, no electricity.
Yeah.
So I was influenced by that. So I was almost a generation leap. So I'm still part of a repair society. I've never jumped into modernity. Because of my parents' influence growing up in the Depression. And my mom's parents are from Stewart County, Tennessee. And so the Southern romanticism, the bias towards not just Confederates, but just towards the South as a place, as opposed to a direction, I've always been in love with. And I have pride that I grew up in Medina, Ohio, where Company H and Company K of the 8th Ohio, 2nd Corps, Army of Potomac, they were from there. And I remember the first time I ever saw the word Gettysburg. I couldn't read yet, but my brother saw it on a gravestone. We were cutting through a cemetery going to school, Episcopal Cemetery, and it said Gettysburg. And he's like, "Oh, that guy was killed at Gettysburg." And I'm like, "What's Gettysburg?" And that's where that started. I went back to that grave and found it. The guy's name was James Welch. He was 18, and he was mortally wounded on July 3rd. And the 8th Ohio was the flanking regiment on the northern end of Pickett's charge. They flanked. They wheeled to the south, and he was killed in that.
Okay.
Or mortally wounded. He died on the 5th. And I went back to that grave and found it, and I thought that was kind of neat. But there's a lot of those interesting connections. But the figurines with the Golden Book of the Civil War, which I think everybody has been influenced by, the David Greenspan maps, the bird's eye view, stuff I could, with my imagination could go into. And so with the figurines, I'd mimic the battles, and my brothers were like, "Oh, he's different. He's really lining them up in detail based on the books, putting out the vegetation, making Devil's Den just right."
Yeah.
And so the diorama thing was very big for me. I remember going to Confederama in Chattanooga in 1974 on a trip to Florida on our way back. And we went to Confederama at the base of Lookout Mountain, and they had over 5,000 miniatures with an electric map. And it was really neat. And just the name Confederama, I always thought that was a great name.
That's very neat. Well, so you get this obsession, and you're really in it. And then 1981 comes along, and all of a sudden you are into reenacting. How did you get involved in that?
All right. Well, okay. So this happens really about 1975. I'm at the elementary school library, and I see a book called American Wonderlands. And I think it's from National Geographic. They had a lot of 1950s and 60s reproduction, like colonial stuff of Williamsburg and Rev War. Not Rev War stuff so much, but colonial civilian stuff, not Rev War military so much. But then they had Civil War centennial color photographs.
Okay.
That's when I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And then I had my mom read it to me, and she's like, "Oh, reenactment." I'm like, "What's a reenactment?" And I thought, "Oh, they're not doing any more reenactments till the bicentennial, since the centennial's over." So I thought all the reenactors had hung it up.
Yeah.
And I became a health nut because I wanted to participate in the bicentennial of the Civil War. And I was jogging and eating broccoli as a 9-year-old, like, I got to live to be in the bicentennial of the Civil War. I got to go to the reenactment because I didn't think they existed. And then in 1976, around the July 4th weekend, my parents take me to Gettysburg, and I see them walking around. And I'm like, "Oh, they're around." I have photos of them, some of them. And I remember this Jeb Stewart guy mounted, and several other guys coming up the Tawnytown Road. I have that picture still, and it's just so cool. But then I went back in 77, was ate up by it. But I was so young it was very difficult. And I was I was getting a hold of the Gettysburg Chamber of Commerce, and they wouldn't respond to me. Then I threatened them. I had my mom threaten them. I was like, well, how do I get them to respond? And she goes, well, we'll threaten them somehow, And I don't know. It wasn't mean or anything, but it was like, well, what are we to do? We've written you 3 times. We're trying to get a hold of reenactors that were at the reenactment in the 1976 reenactment.
Yeah.
So they referred us to the Gettysburg Travel Council.
Okay.
They responded, and I have still all the points of contact of the 1976 reenactment. And some of those guys are still around. I have their addresses in there. Well, I was trying to get a hold of these guys. This is several years later, and it was returned to sender. I'd get the purple, the pointing finger. Oh, the guys moved it, and I don't know how to get a hold of them. It happened like 4 or 5 times. Then I found out about Camp Chase Gazette. Got a subscription to that in 1980, and then I saw an ad in the classified ad of a guy in Ohio putting a Confederate unit together in Marietta, pretty far away from where I was in Northern Ohio. But I got a hold of him, named Bill Holshoe, and a great guy. And him and his buddy Dave Roth were putting a group together, and I joined their group. And I was just trying at the time. I had a lawn mowing business to get my uniforms together.
Yeah.
And I had a 2-band Parker Hale Enfield, which was a sweet musket. I had correct shoes, really good shoes, but I had dismounted cavalry uniform because I like cav, but I didn't have a horse or a saddle, like a lot of guys that do cav. So I was one of those Farby dismounted guys, but I was trying. And I had a haversack my mom made out of an Akron Beacon Journal newspaper sack that was copied out of Confederate sketchbook, no canteen. And that was a trip. There was 3,000 guys there, and in 81. And Bill Holshoe, turns out later, several years later, he buys Camp Chase Gazette, became the editor. So I started writing for him, preservation stuff mostly. That's when I got on the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission as an intern. So the Camp Chase writing stuff was going on, the reenacting thing, the 125ths were big. Those are tons of stories right there. But I know we only have so much time. I don't know how much time we have left, but the preservation thing, really, I had no clue. I just assumed Gettysburg was fine because my eye wasn't trained. Yeah. And so I assumed most places were good. And I'd been at Chickamauga. I thought that was substantial. Was Shiloh. That was pretty substantial. So I go down to Virginia in 1991, just for the summer, I thought, and I lived in my brother's basement on a couch. And he was a lawyer for the Army. And he had some space, and he's like, if you want to just, crash here and just, get a job, but, just take advantage of the area, you can just crash here. So I did that. I wound up doing that for years. But it turned out I went with him in June of 91 to see the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Chancellorsville for the first time. And I'd heard about the divided highway, Route 3, going through Chancellorsville and part of Wilderness. And I thought that was pretty disgusting and stupid. But when I went down there, I was at the Wilderness. And remember the Golden Book. Yeah. That gives you orientation. They have names to like Brock Road, or, Orange Plank Road or Widow Tap Farm. So I go down there kind of knowing the area since 9 years old, 24. And I'm on the Hill Ewell Drive. And I'm there to absorb history and get a connection with nature. They're oddly, these places of horror and battle are very peaceful and naturalistic. It's an interesting juxtaposition. And the intersection of the naturalism and the military history and culture is very interesting to look at. But so instead of hearing birds chirping or the wind blowing, I'm hearing circular saws and hammers putting up the homes. I think it's in Lake Wilderness just 100 feet in some cases away from the Confederate earthworks.
Yeah.
Now, for a lot of people, that's a mound of dirt, big deal. For me and for you and our peers, it's the last physical remains of the activity that transpired there. That's where the giants did this crazy stuff. The woods were burning here, but you're hearing the circular saws, and I didn't get it. I wasn't even mad yet because I didn't understand it. It took about a week. And then I started calling the Park Service to volunteer. I'm like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? I got shuffled around. I got a hold of a girl named Kathleen Madigan. And she said, it's so funny that you're calling because there's a group that's just started by Congress called the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. And they have a 2-year lifespan to report to Congress on the status of the battlefields because of places like Chantilly, and Salem Church was just getting destroyed at that point. And most importantly,
you just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
The saga at Manassas, with at this point, prior to the Disney battle, this is Battle Manassas, like, I don't know, 4.0 or something, or 3.0, and Disney's 5.0. I don't know. But this is when Till Hazel, who is a developer in Northern Virginia who makes me cringe, Till is a good old boy and knows how to play the game well, and calls preservationists NIMBYs, not in my backyard. That they only come in the 11th hour, which is, he's got some truth, actually. So Hazel has 500 acres at Manassas, on oddly called Hazel Plain, but no relation to him. And he wants to build on it, and he's got a lawyer named Grayson Haynes III that's repping him, and there's pressure. And the Prince William County Board of Supervisors historically have had a pretty pathetic preservation voting record, whether it's Disney or Hazel or whatever. And I followed them quite a bit for a while at times. They didn't like to see me at times. But with that one, Hazel winds up getting, there's a group called Save the Battlefield Coalition that starts. David Lowe's involved from the Park Service, who I work with at Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. I became an intern with him. Annie Snyder, who was I think one of the first female World War II Marines, she became she was the local farm owner near there who was railing against it. So it wasn't quite the Civil War component. This is a land rights thing, not pro-development, but anti-development land rights. I want to save the farm kind of thing, from a woman World War II veteran. And she also fought Disney, and she cried on cue on Capitol Hill. She was great. She was really good. So she's a great person to look at. She was impressive. Anyhow, Save the Battlefield Coalition starts up. There's all this pressure. They're at the Gettysburg 125th reenactment. I remember signing a petition there. So in 1989, Reagan signs a bill, and there's a rider bill on there. I don't know exactly how these things work, but this rider bill was for Hazel to get paid for those 500 acres. Now, there's different figures, but this is a figure I remember, and I've seen it in print. For the roughly 500 acres, he got, in 1989 dollars, $136 million. That breaks down to about $272,000 per acre in 1989 dollars. So, is that a preservation victory?
Wow.
So you have to look at this, and so that's why the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission in part came about, and also because of Chantilly getting national coverage because they found remains there when they started digging in 1989, and that made it into the AP. A relic hunter was digging he got permission behind a dozer. I think the story goes this way, and the dozer just skimmed the earth. So this guy was behind him. He had permission, and he was getting reeds, and I think he got South Carolina buttons, and with that was the South Carolina corpse remains.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that made the AP. And so that's where Fairfax County started getting embarrassed. The Board of Supervisors there, and they've been horrible as well. Not to mention Loudoun County, not to mention blah blah blah. Even Spotsylvania County, Stafford County.
Yeah,
and that's just in Virginia. The focus on government is so federalized. It's so focused on the federal level. And I get that in a way. You can see it in news reporting, whether it's print or media or whatever, and you can dissect it mathematically. But through my lens of battlefield preservation, I realized there's so much more power with local government. Where's Doge to look at local government? There's so many various entities, and there's a lot of cronyism. There's a lot of incestuous behavior. And I think there's a lot of, sometimes and sometimes you speculate that there's backhanded behavior financially or soft money ways of helping each other out, scratching each other's back. The Board of Supervisors in many of these counties have green-lighted these things way too quickly. And now that I'm living, in Tennessee, I see it in Williamson County, Franklin. I see it in Rutherford County, Murfreesboro, which is really a disgusting story we could talk about for days. They only own about 15% of the battlefield. And in the 1990s, Mary M. Peckham, the superintendent, wanted to save the land there. And the local powers that be sat down upon her and got Bart Gordon involved, who had been pro-preservation to some degree. And he put pressure on the Park Service. And I believe the way it goes is that she got promoted out of her job and she turned around and sued the Park Service. And she wasn't gagged, because I tried to interview her about 2 years ago, but she had developed brain cancer. And so I couldn't get the story from her, which I greatly regret. I should have acted upon that sooner. And there's still a few people living to talk about the destruction of Stones River battlefield that need to be interviewed, because that's a crime. 15% of the bloodiest single day in Tennessee history, December 31st, 62. How pathetic is that?
Yeah.
And so, you think about Tale of Two Cities, you juxtapose Murfreesboro with nearby Franklin. Franklin's been on the surge of reclamation, bulldozing, reclaiming.
It really has. And I think that's what a lot of people don't see behind the scenes too, is exactly how hard it is to have preservation. And people go to national parks and national battlefields, and they'll go to these places. They're beautiful landscaped areas, and they go and enjoy this stuff, but they don't really see the hard work a lot of people put into it, especially organizations like the American Battlefield Trust that have been working in this stuff for a long time.
Right.
With yourself, you get to that point of working in preservation. You've been doing reenacting for a while, and then all of a sudden, Mr. Horwitz comes along. When exactly does this happen?
This happens in February of 1994. I'm a coordinator for Civil War Journal, reenactor, wrangler, location scout, and we had to do a Fredericksburg episode. And filming in downtown Fredericksburg is not practical. It's a functioning community, so still a lot of great architecture. But a town I fell in love with in 1991 when I first moved to the area to sponge off my brother's couch was Waterford, Virginia, which is still picturesque. A friend of mine described it as Brigadoon, that it comes awake like once a year. It's got a very interesting vibe to it. Quaker settlement, pro-union in the war. Great stories there. I mean, we could talk about that area for days. But I went there for a festival and was blown away by the preservation architecture. And this is in 91, the same time my epiphany with battlefield preservation is coming around. Now I'm seeing communities, this unique community that was so pristine, and it's like, wow, essence.
Yeah.
I mean, if developers could build like this, I'd be pro-preservation. It was like so evocative.
So what is it
And
about preservation that draws you in? I mean, I know a lot of people they want to preserve it because they want to visualize what happened, but people have their different reasons for why they want to preserve these lands. What's yours?
well, I think it's developed over time. Initially, it was because I wanted to follow the giants in gray and blue, um, you know, on that landscape. And when I saw it a Walmart parking lot, or Salem Church or Chantilly, you know, um, I started to self-reflect. It's like, well, why do I feel this way?
Yeah,
So you begin to philosophize, you begin to read, you begin to listen to other things. You find quotes from Civil War veterans that talk about preservation during the war.
yeah,
Albert Finbar Kennelly, 17th New York Veteran Volunteers in North Georgia, had been transferred from AOP to Tecumseh Sherman's army, and he writes that the lines of earthworks are numerous and powerful. And he's writing this to a newspaper, New York Sunday Mercury.
yeah.
Um, they're numerous and powerful, and if spades are trumps, this is ample testimony. If these works could be preserved by law for future generations, they would benefit them more than whole volumes of history.
Yeah,
And words to that effect. And then he gets killed 2 weeks later at Jonesboro in an area that's been totally developed.
yeah,
But that's from a veteran at the time. And I found other ones that talk about preservation as well. Robert E. Lee even talks about preservation in a naturalistic biblical standpoint. And I got to find the quote again on him. But with preservation, I want to give a plug about the group I'm in on the board of, the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust. We've been around since '96. And
yeah.
remember, my epiphany happened at the Wilderness, and I was pissed, or became pissed off, and then motivated. And so in about 1996, they started. I got involved with them in '97, did a preservation march for them in '98 at Chancellorsville on the 135th anniversary of Jackson's flank march. Jackson marched on Saturday, May 2nd, 1863. We marched on Saturday, May 2nd, 1998. 200 of us cleared $37,000, paid off a tenth of debt on 100 acres there where Sims and Wofford's brigades had fought. We did the entire flank march route, then did a public program the next day to about 1,200 spectators. Crick was there, Gary Gallagher was there, Pohanka was there, Hennessy was there, Ed Barse was there. The Postal Service was there. You could mail your letters from the site, and the Postal Service would cancel them from the battlefield. They have the stamp. And we did all this cool stuff. Bob Zabo, the wet plate photographer, was there. First time I worked with him.
Nice.
But the problem is that the 200 reenactors that started the march, and I did about 17 miles. Well, they did about probably 16. I probably did about 18 because I was going around the column as the column was going. So I was doubling, I was doing a lot more.
Okay.
And about 80% of the 200 left.
Oh, wow.
And they had all signed and agreed to stay. And I never bitched at anybody about it, but I only had 40 guys left. And I always remember those 40 guys really well for the public program. And we kicked butt with the 40 guys we had. But
Yeah.
it was a stellar event. I made a preservation video on it. It was the first preservation thing I had done with another fella. And then did another preservation march in 2000, got 300 guys together in Loudoun County, 22 pages of authenticity guidelines. Museum of the Confederacy brought up original items that were there at the battle. One of the shell jackets that was there, Heros von Bork's sword. Heros von Bork was there.
Oh, wow.
One of the guys that gets wounded in the 5th Virginia Cavalry, oddly, his name's Bullock. Oddly, they have 3 of his shell jackets.
Oh, wow.
And he gets killed in January '63. So one of those 3 jackets had to, we assume, was at that battle. So they brought up the one that they thought was there. So I don't know what you call it, of reconnecting an original item to a place on an anniversary.
Yeah.
We were doing John Pelham's and Stewart's delaying action in the Loudoun Valley, which is also known as the 10 Days battles. Great history on it, very pristine area. And those 300 reenactors raised $57,000. And I gave 22,000 of that to Franklin. And that was the first time any land at Franklin had been saved in 40 years, which was great. And I'm like, every time I go buy the property that put the down payment on it, that down payment money was the reenactors' money. And Bars talks about it on tape. I got him talking about it.
Yeah.
But not too many people know that the first preservation land, the first land saved in the modern preservation movement in Franklin was done by the reenactors from that preservation march in Northern Virginia. And that was just 22,000 of the 57,000 we raised.
Yeah.
The other like 16,000 went to Central Virginia Battlefields Trust for Chancellorsville, Tally Farm, right on Route 3 Jackson flank march area or flank attack area.
Okay.
5,000 to McDowell Highland Historical Society because they were great. At the time, they were awesome. I don't know what they are now. I'm not in touch with them, but they were really a big deal then. They put on great events. And then 10,000 to the Snickersville Turnpike Association of Loudoun County. And that's another story altogether. They were hardcore activists in the 90s fighting VDOT to save their stone bridges.
Yeah.
VDOT wanted to bulldoze stone bridges and straighten roads and bulldoze stone walls. And Jeb Stuart's guys fought behind. First Massachusetts Cavalry got butchered in that road bed, and there's a monument there, and VDOT wanted to straighten the road, and it's like, what the F is going on? And so I got involved with them, and we got really like college activist militant in the area. And a lot of these people were well-heeled financially. So a lot of these wives in particular were like angry ladies that were well educated and had money, and so they could fight. They had connections, down in Richmond, so they could fight VDOT.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
And so we won. And Bud Hall was involved. Bud Hall was at our 2000 Preservation March, as was Pohanka, as was Bars. Bars marched with us. We had him in a Confederate officer's uniform. He did about 6 miles with us.
No kidding.
This one big mouth reenactor. He's a West Point graduate. I won't name his name, but he's just a big mouth. Everybody knows who I'm talking about, probably. He's a West Point grad, and he wears it on his sleeve. And he was marching. He was marching with it. We had about 100 of the 300 in this year 2000 march. We had about 100 Confederates portraying 35th North Carolina. Hardcore looking dudes. Really great. We had a great authentic turnout, man. It was amazing. Horse-drawn guns. But we had Bars dressed up as a Confederate officer with primo stuff.
Yeah.
And he's marching along as an officer, and he's passing the rank and file. And this West Point grad says, "Hey, Grandpa, what was it like at Valley Forge?" And Bars turns around and he goes, "It was cold." He goes, "It was cold." He goes, "But I'll tell you what, I'll be leaving you in the dust 6 miles up the road." And that banter was just great. And we had a National Geographic photographer with us.
Yeah.
And there's some great Civil War Preservation Trust
So it
stories.
looks like we got a question here from the audience. Bill says, what are the characteristics of a good Civil War reenactor?
Oh, well. Well, I guess we can get philosophical here.
There we go.
Well, age is a reality. I'm 58, and And, you know, I've always been thoughtful about my weight, and I've lost a few times, but most of the time I win. Like right now, I'm drink a ton of water. My exercise routine isn't a gym. I'm landscaping my yard for 2 to 4 hours a day just for exercise. I'm drinking water and cranberry juice. I'm probably down to probably 165 pounds now, you know,
Okay.
and I'm 6'2".
Yeah.
But being lean is a big deal. And the other thing is Chinese hair care products help. That's what I use, because if I didn't dye my beard, you know, I'd look more like Robert E. Lee's style of hair, I would think. So I'm trying to create the illusion as I'm into the farbdom age range now.
Okay.
So I'm pretending now. But at youth, being lean, having a good attitude, and wanting to dig, doing detective work.
Okay.
That's digging into the first person accounts, getting into the various socioeconomic differences in the Army of Northern Virginia, getting into the psyche of the 17th Virginia, getting into the mindset of guys in Kershaw's brigade, reading their accounts here, you know, and not just Confederate. I mean, to understand Confederate stuff, even though I got a Confederate bias, I have the utmost respect for feds. I mean, I love reading federal accounts. To understand Confederates, you got to read federal accounts too.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's not, you know, you gotta, you know, even though you got your partisanship or whatever, and wanting to be a digger, and also trying to be open-minded, and also understanding some sort of sense of realms of believability and authenticity.
Okay.
How far do you go with certain things? Like what, you know, your kit, getting into the micro thought of it, you know. And one of the groups I have to give credit to, and a lot of people that'll probably listen to this at some point or listening to it now are probably aware of a group that, to call them reenactors wouldn't be fair.
Okay.
The Liberty Rifles is a group that's evolved over the years in various iterations that's really strong right now.
Yeah.
I've been to some of their events, and I have to say, since doing this in 81, kudos to them. I still have something to look forward to. You know,
Nice.
I just
Yeah.
went to their artillery sister group called First Section. I just was at a training weekend with horses down in Georgia for a weekend, and it was seeing some old friends and meeting a lot of new people, enjoying socializing in person, and as opposed to texting or whatever, or group chats, whatever. Hearing a voice, getting old timey in person. Wow. And I portrayed Nathan Bedford Forrest on Civil War Journal, and I shouldn't have. I was working with Don Triani and Brian Pohanka, and Don called me up, and Don's a interesting fellow, and he's like, he always called me Bob Hodges, and he's like, Hodges, we need to find a Forrest. Well, I knew by this time my ancestors had rode with Forrest at one point, luckily not at Fort Pillow, but and so I said, well, what about me? And he goes, how tall are you? And I'm like 6'2". And he goes, Forrest was 6'2". And he goes, how much you weigh? And I'm like, 160, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is in the mid 90s. And he goes, oh, Forrest was about 220. And I'm like, oh. So, and he goes, can you ride? Yeah, I can
All
ride.
right.
I sat on the back of a horse twice in my life. The first time in kindergarten, and got thrown, and almost got killed then. And so I lied for my vanity and for my ego to portray Nathan Bedford Forrest, because I like Forrest. Forrest has actually an interesting civil rights record.
So how did that work out for you, getting on the back of that horse and not knowing what you're doing?
I almost got killed. They had open stirrups, and the horse wrangler, oh, he's a character. I don't think he need the horse enough with the I forget what you call it. The cinch strap goes underneath,
Okay.
the belly band or what?
Down.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, they stick their bellies out when you're doing that. It's just sometimes you got to knee them in, you know, to get it purposely tight. Otherwise, it'll be loosened up later, right?
Right.
Well, I don't think he did that. And so I get on this thing, and I'm on this thing, and I'm like, it seems like one leg is shorter than the other three on this thing,
Okay.
you know. I'm like, whoa, and I'm like, oh, and the stirrups were open stirrups; they weren't hooded, right?
Yeah.
And the kit I have is from Don Trelawney, and the uniform was made, Confederate officer's uniform, made by Charlie Childs, creme de la creme
Yeah.
manufacturer of gear. And the boots were Connell boots. This guy Connell in the 116th Pennsylvania back in the 80s made primo boots. And Trelawney had these Jeb Stewart like thigh high boots, man, that were badass. They're like Forrest would wear, or Mosby wore, that stand up shot he did. And I'm wearing this stuff, and I'm like, man, this is cool. Got an original saber on. Got
Yeah.
my 44 pistol I bought at the Ashland Gun Show when I was 11, carrying that, and then I was like, man, and then eventually I'm off, and my one boot is stuck in the stirrup, and the saddle is spun underneath, and I'm under the horse. Well, my screams of mortal terror made the horse go faster because I wasn't thinking, because I was scared, screaming like a girl. And well, it made the horse flip the horse out, and it was gone, man. So I'm getting pummeled by these hooves underneath this horse, and this horse is going for this stone wall. This is in
Oh, no.
Madison. It's in Madison County, Virginia, just north of Charlottesville. Beautiful area. Going towards this old stone wall. Well, we're just right by the Rapidan. We're right
Yeah.
there, and beautiful area. And this horse is running full speed because my screams are making it go, you know, and I'm getting pummeled, man. I'm getting tore up, and it's
Yeah.
going towards the stone wall. And
Yeah.
it was a very weird thought I'd never had before. It wasn't, am I going to die? It
Like, oh man,
was,
today's the day.
how many seconds do I have left? And I
Yeah.
thought of one of my best friends at the time, and I thought of my mom, and then I thought, well, people will be talking about this one for a while. I got an original sword on it. I'm playing Nathan Bedford Forrest, the Wizard of the Saddle, and at the moment I'm whizzing in the saddle, or under the saddle. It was a mess, and I had 3 broken ribs.
Oh
And I
man.
didn't know it at the time, and my adrenaline was so. And see, I didn't get hit, smashed up against a stone wall, because my leg, I think it's my left leg slid out of the leg that was still in the stirrup, slid out of the stirrup just before would have been made, splashed, modern art masterpiece all over the stone wall. And so my adrenaline was like never before. Like,
Yeah.
I think I could like jump over buildings at this moment. You know, I'm like,
Right.
so like, woo! Like, I could understand the adrenaline of a rodeo rider. Well, I didn't know how busted up I was, because I was, woo, man, that is, you know, I was flipping out. I wasn't crying or anything, but I'm like, man, I'm in practically, like, what kind of roller coaster was that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And they didn't get any of that on tape, unfortunately. And the riders come up, and he's like, you're not okay. You think you're okay. You're not okay. Your adrenaline's jacked up. Just stay right there. And he goes, you need an ambulance. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And so the Hollywood people, they didn't want an ambulance either. They wanted to get on with the show. And so they were kind of downplaying it. And I was all right with it. I wasn't feeling that sore. That had come later. I didn't know. So I didn't do any more mounted that day, but I did some more filming that day. I did a scene where I yelled at some soldiers like I was the gunnery or the drill instructor in Full Metal Jacket. You know, who said that? You know, that guy, gunnery, Hartman. I was doing my Forrest Hartman, you know, on some guys. They weren't recording the audio because I could say whatever I wanted. And so my veins were popping out of my neck, flipping out on one of these guys. And it looked pretty cool, actually. And they did various filming, and it was hard to be a character filming with them being, to me, so unimaginative. They
Yes.
could have done, and because I had a film background and an art background from Kent State, I wanted to do the filming.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, I'm thinking, you guys are wasting time. We could be kicking this thing out of the park, and they just didn't know what they were doing. They didn't, and
Yeah.
they didn't know reenactor psychology or subculture either. I mean, to
Yeah.
deal with these people. And now the people at TNT did when at Gettysburg, when there was almost a mutiny on the set of Gettysburg, they brought in 18 kegs of beer. They knew how to deal with reenactors.
Well, I mean, you know how all those things turned out back then too, though. It was always the same 5 or 6 clips that were pieced together, and there's that music in the background, and panning to the historical photographs and things like that. So
Oh
I
yeah.
I can kind of see why it would turn out that way.
Yeah,
So
a lot of this stuff in retrospect, production value wise, is pretty boring. Although credit to them for doing what they did at the time. They did
yeah,
try for authenticity. Trowny was involved. Pohanka was involved. They filmed bars quite a bit. They had a good Jack Davis. They had a good crew of people.
yeah,
You know, People like Thomas Cartwright, people like Ross Massey here in Nashville. He was on the old Civil War Journal of Nashville Franklin, I think.
yeah.
So pretty interesting.
So Horowitz comes along, and you kind of take him under your wing a little bit, and you show him the ropes. You show him what it's like to do that as a hardcore, as he
Yeah.
puts it, and you kind of get to know him a little bit. What was it like having that outsider come to the inside and just kind of show him the ropes and show him everything, and just did he present it to you in the first place that he was actually writing a book about this?
Well, you bring up a good point. He was misleading. Now,
Huh.
I wouldn't say I have a love-hate relationship with Tony Horowitz, even though he's no longer with us, which is weird, to think about. But
Yeah,
I guess I'm getting used to that as I'm getting older. There's so many people that I think about: Ed Bars, Brian Pohanka, blah 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 blah.
yeah,
Uh, I have a like-dislike relationship with Tony.
yeah,
I am grateful. I'm grateful in general. I have a great deal of my attitude in life is gratitude. My attitude is gratitude that, again, that I can mean that religiously. I can mean that spiritually. Um, it's been a wonderful journey. I've had gifts placed before me by multitudes of people. Horowitz was one of them. And I met him in February of '94. So I went on these tangents. Met him at Civil War Journal when we were filming in Waterford, Virginia. He had just gotten back from, I think he had reported on Bosnia as like a guy in the field, and he had been in Desert Storm as a guy in the field, and did some Gonzo stuff. And so he was doing Wall Street Journal at the time, and we're filming, and we had permission from the Waterford Foundation. We're filming in Waterford on a Saturday morning in February of '94, and eventually he comes out with coffee, and there's a stone wall near his old place where he lived. He lived in 2 different places in Waterford. The first place was near the stone wall that we used as the stone wall at Fredericksburg,
okay,
and then. He heard gunfire, and this is at the time really bucolic, idyllic backwoods Virginia, where you hear sheep and cattle.
yeah, yeah,
And it's somewhat like that in certain areas, but it's really on the battle front line of preservation. What it's going to look like, and it's heavy. Anyhow, so he comes out, and like it's in the book, it's pretty accurate. He talks to various friends of mine in the newly formed Southern Guard, which was really kind of just taken off like a rocket. Just
yeah,
the vibe of the Southern Guard, the synergy of the people. It wasn't perfect. It could have been warmer. There was a little bit of elitism there, and but we were really kind of a magnet, and we kind of formed from the nucleus of the movie Gettysburg. So anyhow, Southern Guard guys are there at the filming, and we had Paul Smith, the great forge cap maker in the National Regiment. A lot of great guys. 1st Pennsylvania Reserve reenactors, great guys, very authentic. And high caliber authenticity, amazing. Some great scenes that they didn't use enough of, and it was just the editing that they did. And, again, it's the shooting and the editing. Anyhow, Horowitz is like, "What are you doing?" He's not used to hearing gunfire there, and they're like, "Oh, we're filming this thing, blah blah." And then eventually, I start talking to him, and my dad was not bashful, or he was initially in life, and he just kind of overcame it, and he sold cars for 30 years and ran for political office, lost every time, but ran as a Democrat in a Republican county for sheriff 3 times and lost every time. But he developed the gift of gab, and I think that was probably out of insecurity. He just forced himself into it. But I think over time I did the same thing, especially when I got attention from Confederates in the Attic, where people asked me to do speaking gigs. And in truth, I was a closet agoraphobic. I would get like prickly feelings on my back and like sweat running down my back, and my voice would crack and I'd turn red. And it was really tough. The first big talk I gave after Confederates in the Attic was to 250 people in Gettysburg. And, I would say, if you give me a letter grade, what's below an F? Give me a G. Give me a G. But it was really hard. It was really tough, but people wanted me to give talks and stuff. And so I used Confederates in the Attic as a vehicle for preservation. And that's another thing. Okay, so Horowitz is hanging out with this. He's writing for the Wall Street Journal. Meet him in February of '94. He writes about me in the Southern Guard because he goes to the spring drill in like March of '94.
Yeah.
He's hanging out with us that Friday night, freezes his ass off in 28-degree temperatures. And this is where Mosby hid out. This is at the property where one of our friends lived on this property, his parents owned it, where Mosby hid out on the tree, left the bedroom. That's where we were drilling at that house.
Okay.
And in the plain, near the plains. And so we were spooning, of course, and you didn't know those kind of antics were going to be written about. And see, he was saying he wanted to get into reenacting.
Oh, okay.
He didn't say he wanted to write about it.
Got it.
And then he wanted to write about it. See, I thought, wow, a guy, he said he wanted to get into reenacting, and he was not knowledgeable of the Civil War somewhat, not on our level, but pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, a guy of that pedigree that writes for the Wall Street Journal and's been a reporter in Desert Storm, what a cool guy to have in our outfit. And he's in Loudoun County. We got a bunch of guys that live in Loudoun County.
Yeah.
So I didn't know I was going to get written about.
Okay.
And then it became that. And it was like, so he's hanging out with us that weekend, but then that Saturday afternoon he leaves, and guess where he goes? He goes to the White House to hang out with Al Gore.
Oh, wow.
So so I'm talking a celebrity guy, pedigree guy, and how cool would it be to have him in our outfit, that kind of thing. But then it developed into writing about it. And then, the Wall Street Journal article comes out in June of '94. And I took a lot of flack for that from guys in my own unit. Right. Because they're like, wow, how did you let this guy in our group? Well, it's like, I didn't realize that he was going to write about it initially. He just kind of led on to that eventually. It was very smooth.
Yeah.
And I got, because I was the conduit between the group and him, I got, it hurt. I got railed on. It was rude. There was a coldness towards me. It might not be direct all the time, but there was a coldness, and that was very hurtful. And it was like, hey, I had the best of intentions. I didn't know I was going to get written about. Right. I just thought it would be cool to have this guy hanging out with us and cutting up with us and going to battlefields with us and doing volunteer programs at the Park Service. He seems like a really cool dude. Yeah. So then it turns into, something else. And then, from that Wall Street Journal article, which was, a mixed bag, it would sensationalize things. And so it made me reluctant to hang out with him. But then he wanted to do the book because he wins the Pulitzer Prize in the interim.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when he wins the Pulitzer Prize, he gets a green light to pretty much do what he wants. And so he gets a $200,000 advance from, I think it's Bantam or Viking, Pantheon. But he gets a $200,000 advance to do the book. So some of the stuff from the Wall Street Journal article is in the book, the drill and stuff, and elaborates on that. But that's basically the same story from, but we're together, pretty much off and on 3 years. He wanted me on the road more, but I had gotten a gig at Time Life Books researching about the Civil War. Like, what a tough job. I couldn't believe I had it. I'm like, oh, I'm getting paid to do this. I forgot.
That's pretty cool.
Oh my God. I did that for 5 years. I worked on Voices of the Civil War series, which is long, great story. And it's in another episode. The story of Time Life Books working there is a great thing. Great story. Then I worked on the Civil War art book from Time Life. So it was about a total of 5 years I worked there. And, my commute was like, 4 miles. And that's pretty good for DC. So, and I was just eating it up, joined the local SCV camp where Pat Buchanan was an honorary member. And went to the UDC hall there and hung out with Horowitz. And my mentor was Brian Pohanka. I had a brother pass away a week before the Gettysburg reenactment in 1981. I won't go into the details of that, but that's a different story. And so after my brother passes away, a shocking incident, I didn't think I was going to be going to the reenactment. Because I just had a family member die. But my parents wanted me to go because they knew my heart was set on it. And they said, we want you out of the house after this traumatic event. So I went to my first reenactment with a weird, already knowing about the death of a loved one, a close one, from just the week before. So it was kind of a weird Civil War experience at my first reenactment. My point is Brian Pohanka almost kind of filled that void of my brother that had passed.
Okay.
And
so he's kind of like a brother to you throughout that time.
Big brother. Yeah, he's a big brother. And I meet Brian about 10 years after my brother passes. And that was a tough time. But Brian filled that void. And Brian was a very sincere person and an angry person at good things to be angry with, like preservation. He'd get white knuckled. We'd drive together to a reenactment and he'd be white knuckled. He just, I won't repeat everything he said. It wouldn't be fair to him, but they were great things, but they were hard. But it broke his heart because he grew up in the Rockville area and preservation came into Brian's heart at a young age. And it didn't have to do with Civil War battlefields.
Okay.
The farms that he used to run through around Rockville were being turned into shopping malls and cul-de-sac, press board, hot glue gun, McHomes.
And so he's watching his own history disappear, essentially.
His own, and feeling that loss, like not quite the death of a family member, but something, or a pet, but something like a part of a tenant of you. That's something that you, and when that dies, it's hard to quantify that. It's hard to put a number on that pain of that. And that's the broader perspective about battlefields. It goes into the hardwood forest. It goes into the family farm. It makes me think about agriculture. It makes me think about what the future is. It makes me think about what the future of Williamson County here in Tennessee is going to be. What's Franklin going to look like? And even with the reclamation that's going on in core parts of the battlefield, the surrounding area of Williamson County is getting so ate up. Rutherford County is a joke. I was with Ed Barse filming them. I got a bunch of footage of Ed Barse. I got Ed Barse on 13 battlefields. I got to do something with
Nice.
it. I got 100 hours of Ed Barse at least.
Yeah, you got to share that.
I do. I got to do some. I in the world of procrastination, I'm a major general. So, but I was with Barse filming them down at Stones River, and I said, this place is so disappointing, Ed. Do you mind if I use expletives, or is that
No, go right ahead.
okay? So I go, this place is a mess. How long has this place been a shithole? And he goes, well, I first got down to Murfreesboro in 1954, and it was a shithole then. And it's a shithole now. Ed was like a dad grandfather mix.
That's pretty spot on.
It was one time I was with Ed. I was seeing him off to the airport in Nashville, and it might have been the same trip. We had filmed at Franklin too. I got some killer footage of him at Franklin on the anniversary.
Nice.
2005. Awesome. He's swinging the sledgehammer into the Pizza Hut on the anniversary with his one good arm. It's really awesome, man. It's really good. But I saw him off at the airport, and I got out of the car and helped him with his bag. He always traveled light, and I hugged him. Well, he didn't hug me. I hugged him, and I go, Ed, I love you. And he goes, okay. And I said, you don't love me? And he goes, I don't love anybody. He goes, I like you.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he goes, Hodge, there's only one person that's a bigger ham than you, and that's me. I got it. We would drink together. We'd have a good time together. He'd come over to my house, and when I lived in Arlington, and like phase 2 of being there, and we were pretty close by. He'd take the metro over, and he'd hang out in my cement block shack in downtown Arlington. We'd have bonfires in the yard and bluegrass bands, and we were like the last house.
That man was definitely a national treasure, that's for sure.
Oh,
and a storyteller. I mean, the way he delivered a story. I mean, I'm looking back on some of the old footage, how he talked, the History Channel and everything, and I mean, nobody could deliver a story the way Ed delivered it.
Well, yeah, there's so many things about him. It's like it's hard to compare him with anybody. Because he's like such a unique human being, and in fact, I don't really think of him. His passing is really his being is so big. I just don't think of him as gone. I can't talk to him, but I got 9 messages on my phone from him still. If you want to hear him, I can pull them up. But I hear his voice every day when I listen to those messages. But but we were good chums, and when I interned at the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission, that's when I met him, and I was like, holy crap, that's the guy from the Ken Burns series.
Yeah.
And so I go to the first Civil War Sites Advisory Commission meeting in July of '92, and McPherson's there. Ken Burns on the board, but he never went to a single meeting. Various people, Mary Robinson Berry, I think, or Holly Robinson was on there. Several people, Hyde Murray, but Barse was, the big deal, and he took me to I took the commission to 6 battlefields in one day. I remember one time. Did Chantilly, Ball's Bluff. We did.
So that man must have had a lot of energy for his age.
Unbelievable. He'd outmarch everybody, man. And then he'd go past you, and like when he'd want to humiliate me, it'd be like he'd go past me with the swagger stick, with the combat boots on, moving, like walking like double quick. And he's like, "Come on, Hodge, you're holding up the war." And I'm like, okay, all right, and he's getting everybody crap, but he gave me more crap, I think, than anybody.
That's
I
awesome.
guess it was an odd term of endearment. He gave me shit like crazy. What was that battle out in Missouri, Merdazine, and it's French, and it's spelled nothing like it sounds. It's like, can you spell Merdazine, Hodge? You know, saying crap to me like that. It was so funny. But he appreciated. He told me one time, he goes, you know, I appreciate your good nature, and that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
But there's so many bars. We could talk for days about bars. There's so many great stories of bars I have.
There's always those people in your life that really make that big difference. And, I know I've come across a lot of people in my career throughout my years in the military and even today, doing this hobby that I like to do so much. I bump into so many people that inspire me and just kind of keep me going with these things. If you had to point to one person throughout the many years that you've been doing this that inspires you and was that driving force that helped you keep going, doing the things that you do, who would it be?
Well, you cut out there for a moment. Can you repeat the question? I think I got it, but can you repeat it again?
Yeah, if you had like one person in your life in the last 20, 30 years that has inspired you the most, that keeps you doing the things that you do, who would that person be?
I would have to. I can't say one. I can't say one. I'd say Bars. And sorry.
It's okay. I understand. Those relationships definitely mean a lot, and I can definitely get it.
Yeah. I would say Pohanka in a big way. I got a lot of recordings of him. I got to do something with. I there's a guy that some people may know, but Dennis Reen from the 2nd Maryland, one of the Black Hats, the hardcore authentic beginners. Dennis Reen, I would say, was probably in maybe not the first wave, but maybe the second wave. Maybe he was the first wave of the Black Hats, or different waves. But Charlie Childs, the manufacturer of the great authentic clothing, and a whole Les Jensen, all these people come out of the Black Hats.
Yeah.
And so it's NSSA and Centennial reenacting. But Dennis Reen, who passed away I want to say 13 years ago now. And he was one I was going to interview. He was a Marine. I think he was of the Vietnam Monument. You know how they eventually put in the 3 figurines: the Caucasian, the person of African American background, and then the Hispanic.
Yes.
The model for the Caucasian, I believe, is Dennis Reen.
Okay.
And I believe he was also and I could be stepping out a lot, but I think that was Dennis. And Dennis got shot up bad, but he was really into the war. Certain people you meet, you talk to, that you're on a wavelength. Like, you can start a sentence and they can finish it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's material culture or official records or whatever. Reen was one of those people. Another guy, John Henry Kurtz.
Yeah.
Who, if you know his musician background, he sang the song "Drift Away" a year before Dobie Gray took it to #1. And he did a Civil War-esque kind of album that's interesting. You can hear on YouTube. John Henry is a big deal to me. John Henry bought me my first great Federal forage cap. but I think of them almost like a group of guardian angels. Another one is D.P. Newton, who ran the White Oak Museum. D.P. and I had big kinship, and he dies in 2019 of cancer. And
Yeah.
did you ever see the White Oak Museum?
I don't think I've been there before.
Okay. Have you been to the Bull Run Winery? Hard to say.
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay, you know that collection that's there?
Yeah.
Of relics?
Yes.
Okay, that is D.P. Newton's collection. That was at the White Oak Museum. And there's more to it, I think. But that was almost all DP stuff. Is it John Hickox that runs the Bull Run?
I'm not real sure about that.
He was a digger, really nice guy, and everybody was concerned about DP stuff because DP Newton is like like Jesus. He was a fisherman and a carpenter, and he had no ego, and he spoke in this genteel accent. And when I first went to the White Oak Museum, was in May of '98, the day after the Chancellorsville Preservation March. So this is May 4th, 1998. I drive by there. I didn't meet him that day. Drive by the museum looking for the punch bowl where those Confederate images were taken in Stafford. We're hunting, we're doing a punch bowl hunt. We're blown off steam after all the work we did for the Preservation March. We're having a party day. Nursing a hangover, a celebration from the night before. After raising, clearing 37 grand, it's just like we had a heck of a party.
That's
in
pretty
downtown Fredericksburg, all in Confederate uniforms, taking over bars. It was a blast. Anyhow, the next day, we're nursing a hangover, drinking water, looking for the punch bowl. And we go by White Oak, and I'm looking at this brick building. It doesn't look period, but I'm like, just a weird thought. Wonder what's in there.
Yeah.
I get a call that night from Noel Harrison from the Park Service. And he's like, man, you got to meet this guy. I met him at a VDOT hearing on preservation. He's speaking out against the VDOT, and I'm there as a Park Service representative speaking out against it. And I meet this guy, and he's really cool. And he's got this collection of stuff. And Noel's trying to tell me about the collection, but he's laughing because he's so overwhelmed by what he saw in this collection. He goes, man, you guys see this? He goes, this is so good. I don't think it's going to last. He goes, I'm superstitious. Something this good will not last. And so it's in that brick building that I wondered what was in there on that Monday after the Chancellorsville March. The Monday later, which would be May 11th, I'm with John Hennessy and Noel Harrison, and we go in there, we meet DP, and then I see the collection that was in that brick building I wondered about, that I just saw for the first time the week before.
Yeah.
And I go in there, and there's a cannon there with the H.M. Smith carriage maker label on it. And there's looks like a handmade Confederate battle flag, and you're starting to see, it's an old schoolhouse. It's DP's old schoolhouse. Got the old stove in it still. And a big research facility too on a wing of it. And it's not open to the public at this time. He didn't have permits or anything from the county. This is just his own little thing, right?
Yeah.
And this is millions of dollars. Smithsonian came in and valued it at $3.8 million in 1999 dollars. $3.8 million in 1999 dollars. Okay. And this is all DP stuff that he dug over the years of the Stafford camps, the Confederate camps, North Carolina buttons, Virginia buttons, blah, 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 U.S. plates, just crazy bottle collection. And he documented stuff. He could document company streets. He could find company streets and tell you which company of which regiment in some areas. And he would have it in a book. So he found this item here. Oh, this was in the hut in the company street of Company A of the 2nd Massachusetts or something. Not always that way, but a lot of that way. And so it's almost like a cross between Forrest Gump and Rain Man in this like mystical level. And he had this genteel accent. And I mean it in the best of ways. I worship this man. So many people did. When you say DP Newton, that's like E.F. Hutton.
Okay.
It's just like quiet. He's a big deal. And DP had this genteel voice, and Hennessy and Noel and I go in, and we're looking at just some of the stuff so far, and I'm like, you mean to tell me that this is all your stuff? And he's like, uh-huh. And I'm like, you dug all this stuff? And he goes, yeah. Well, it ain't really mine. You see, I never paid for it, so I can't sell it. It ain't really mine. So he's like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like this precious Tidewater voice, this precious, where you meet this person and right away you want to defend him. You want to protect him. It's like this guy's gold. This guy's like, the Lord broke the mold with this guy. Same thing with bars, It's just like, holy mackerel. And so Hennessy, we're by the cannon, and then Hennessy goes, where'd you get the tube? And DP goes, oh, I made it. and Hennessy's like, you made the tube. And he's like, uh-huh. And he was like, how'd you make it? And he goes, well, I took some scrap metal from around the yard and welded it together and sanded it down and bored out the barrel. I wouldn't fire it, though. I think it could be dangerous. And then Hennessy's like, you made the tube. And then DP's mom, Polly, she's beautiful. Oh, she's so great. She said, and DP didn't use any power tools either. And I was like, wow, And he was Wayne Newton's cousin, by the way, the entertainer. He's Wayne Newton's cousin.
I did not know.
Yeah. And Wayne Newton claims to be an Indian. And at the time I said, I heard you're Wayne Newton's cousin. He goes, uh-huh. And I said, I heard Wayne Newton's an Indian. He goes, oh, sometimes cousin Wayne speaks with a forked tongue. And he winked at me. But they are Indian, Potomac Indian. DP was a member of the Potomac Indian tribe.
Oh wow!
And up until he passed. But he passed in 2019, and they had a Virginia flag over his coffin. And I wrote an article in Civil War News about it because DP was such a big deal in the relic community and preservation community in the region, and becoming nationally actually. And they had to have the funeral in a high school auditorium because he was such a big, rich person. He often walked to where he wanted to go. He only saw like 3 movies in his life: Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, and I think Forrest Gump. I think those are. But and I'm simplifying. Like, that's when I initially met him, but he was very backwoods, very 19th century, and so you wanted to be around him. You wanted to be in the museum, especially in the winter when the wood fire would be going in the stove, and hearing him and the locals coming in with relics and talking about where they found them, and hearing the indigenous people, the truly indigenous Potomac Indian people. But I mean that in a indigenous. They weren't transplants that were DC commuters. They were people that had been there for a long time. The Newtons, the Sullivans, the Frosts, the Joneses, the Bullocks, which Sandra Bullock is, I think, a relative of. But the funeral procession was so huge. I spoke there, and the Second Maryland Fifes and Drums played there. The funeral procession was an amazing final statement of DP Newton. Now, we talked about preservation in the Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville area and how it's getting blown up and everything. But what transpires on this Saturday afternoon in Fredericksburg on Route 1, the Jeff Davis Highway still at the time, is the funeral procession with so many police. And it was a Herculean thing that DP posthumously did. He stopped Fredericksburg traffic for 45 minutes. Unbelievable.
That's something else right there.
And one of the people in front of me, not in the procession, but one of the people, they were tired of waiting. And so they saw opportunity and they jetted across. And then a Stafford County sheriff pulled them over, and boy, hearing the bawling out that this fella got, "You don't cross the funeral procession of D.P. Newton." It was unbelievable, but it was
Yeah.
really grand. And when we put him to rest, he had the Virginia flag on his coffin, and the fifes and drums were playing Rosa, Alabama, and Dixie, and Stonewall Jackson's Way, Yellow Rose of Texas, and Old 1812, some of those songs from Josie Wales. But DP was really salt of the earth. He was a Confederate in many ways, not like a neo-Confederate weirdo, but he really felt Confederate history. And he had the utmost respect for federal soldiers. Right where the White Oak intersection was, where the museum was, that was a camp, I think, of the 6th, New Jersey. And he had the utmost respect. He built federal huts there. And I would say 85-90% of his collection was federal.
Yeah.
And the research facility that went with the objects, this is stuff that he got from going to the nearby National Archives just up the road in DC.
Yeah.
So he would have just folders full of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was a sensory overload, and it's kind of like going back to Jesus. There's BC and AD, right? We measure time in BC and AD. And I would say that about D.P. Newton. There's life before you've met D.P. Newton, and there's life after meeting D.P. Newton. And D.P. is one of those people that I look up to, and although gone, and I can, I have sad thoughts that I can't see him anymore, but my life is so rich from him. And so rich from Bars, and so rich from Horwitz, even though it's prickly at times. But Pohanka and Dennis Reen and John Henry Kurtz and Nat Morrison, who owns Welborn up in Loudon, he passed away a week from when DP died. And so when I went to DP's funeral, I went to Nat's as well. And that's where John Pelham stayed, and he carves his initial in a pane of glass. It's still there, and it says Oct 2862, and his lieutenant that was with him. And this is part of the Stuart Pelham fighting against the Federals. But I wrote an article about it in the Washington Post years ago, and I titled it "The Confederate Stud." Right, when you could probably write an article that was friendly towards a Confederate officer. And I wrote about Welborn and Nat Morrison, and the owner of Welborn, whose ancestor was Colonel Richard Delaney of the 6th or 7th Virginia Cavalry. And so Pelham stayed there. Yankees, went through. There were bullets in the, hitting the windows, and there's diaries from the family that just were only published maybe 20 years ago. And that's where we did the preservation march in Loudoun County. That's where, I was telling you about Bars and everything. And I remember when I first met Nat Morrison, who owned Welborn, and it still in the family since like 1760.
Okay.
528 acres in Loudoun County, unheard of. Land rich, and still with the family, so bizarre. And so I met him, and you can stay there. And to call it a B&B would be an insult. It's its own thing. To call it an inn would be an insult. It's just Welborn.
Yeah.
And all the furniture is like furniture that F. Scott Fitzgerald stayed on when he wrote about Welborn, or Heroes von Bork when he got wounded at Milburg stayed on, or Pelham sat on, or Stewart, or Jackson. And it's just like, you're in it, man. Essence of history. It's like thick.
Well, and at the end of the day, what this really boils down to is it's living the experience, right? I mean, we're all getting that experience when we go to these places, when we get to these battlefields and we talk to people, and the Ed Bears of the world, or Ed Bars of the world, and Pohankas and all of those people. And even though we're coming up on time now to cut this thing short, but it has been one heck of an experience getting to talk to you here on this channel and hear those stories. And I really hope that everybody out there listening to this definitely feels the exact same way. I can't thank you enough for coming on here and talking to us about those people. and sharing those experiences. It's really something else. And yeah, maybe we'll get you back on here again. And we can maybe pull some videos up there and start showing a little bit of Ed Bearsoff. I mean, JD from History Underground. I don't know if you know him. He mentioned earlier you definitely got to get those videos out there.
The main thing is just like looking for people to work with to do it. I realistically can't do it on my own. I stepped out of film and I threatened to get back into it, but I'm a Luddite when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
And I'm a candle in an electric world. And so it's like, I'm a creator and I'm good at it, I think. And I've done good stuff. I got an Emmy Award on Franklin, and I did that years ago, and I did something with Spotsylvania, but I want to do more.
Yeah.
And part of the motivation is that I can't die a happy person. I don't intend to anytime soon, by the way, but I can't die a happy person until certain things are met.
Yeah.
And so, and you don't know what the future is, and you hope that and my health has been fine, but you always hope, knock on wood. But I do want to do stuff with the bar stuff, but I really need to collaborate with somebody. And I don't think it'd take a whole lot, but I honestly know I'm not going to do it on my own. And the thing is what I'd like to do. I want to monetize it. I want to make money, but that's not if that was a primary thing, I guess we would have done something with it a while ago.
Yeah.
I do want to make money, but I want to also use it as a vehicle for preservation, not just talk about preservation, but do something, really. Right. And to use it as a revenue stream and to have like various vehicles for it to go to acquire land. And I know we got to go, but CVBT, they've saved almost 2,000 acres. I just want to say this super quick.
Yeah.
Churchill visited there in 29, around the time of the stock market crash, of fall of 29.
Yeah.
And there's even film footage of it, him and his brother, I think. And the stuff he writes is great. He talks about preservation, talks about you got to get out of the car. It's, you can read the books, but you got to walk it, and he's got a Confederate bias, you can tell. But that whole landscape there, you look at it, of the 10 costliest battles of the Civil War, 4 of those are within 15 miles of each other. That's like Verdun, right?
Yeah.
And that's in 18 months. Fredericksburg to Spotsylvania is 18 months. Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Wilderness, Spotsylvania, not to mention, Salem Church and things like that.
Right.
But now you got repeat customers, but that's 750,000 troops in 18 months. And that leaves about 110, 120,000 behind.
Yeah.
In about 15 miles. And then you juxtapose that with the 1998 National Park Service report that only about 14% of the study area at Spotsylvania Courthouse was saved, only about 21% of the wilderness, only about 15% of Chancellorsville, and Fredericksburg in 1998 was considered a lost battlefield, that they couldn't do their job to interpret in the 1998 report. Now, there's been good things that have happened, but that's why you look at the numbers. That's why my focus is on those 4 battlefields, not exclusively. I give money to Franklin every year. I think about Tennessee a lot now because I'm here, but my preservation focus will always be Spotsylvania area, Brock Road area. So,
yeah, it's an amazing place. It definitely is. And for those of you that don't know, you got to check out Central Virginia Battlefield Trust. They've done a lot of good work for sure.
Oh, thanks. And can I just say one last plug?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I've been involved with recently is the monument stuff, and I know it can get sensitive, and it breaks my heart and makes me angry too. But especially the monument at Arlington Cemetery, the so-called Reconciliation Monument, that was the brainchild of Union veteran and President William McKinley, and he challenged the UDC to raise the money. And I'm butchering the story, but they got Moses Ezekiel, the Confederate Jewish veteran, to sculpt it. And his request at his death was to be buried at that monument because that was his favorite monument, the Reconciliation Monument. The last administration took it down, and DOD, I think, went really haywire. The group I'm involved with, and I'm still involved with CBBT and green space preservation and everything, but I'm involved with the monument stuff because I think it's really worrisome. I kind of worry that it's Maoism, Maoist revolutionary type stuff going on. It's really weird, and I just been digging into it. But the monument thing, the Reconciliation Monument, there's a group called Defend Arlington, and you can find them on Facebook. Just look up Defend Arlington. And they've done yeoman service, especially the women in the group that are great workers, that are trying to get the monument put back up. And I worry about the monument as a precedent, because we thought just a few years ago, well, they're removing monuments from courthouses, but they'll be safe in cemeteries. Well, if the most famous cemetery in America can have the Reconciliation Monument taken down, that sets precedent for all the cemeteries in America where monuments that make somebody unhappy can be taken down. And so that's why I'm really opposed to Governor Youngkin of Virginia accepting the monument and sitting in a warehouse in Chesterfield, Virginia right now. But Defend Arlington, because the administration has changed, and they're obviously, from their verbiage, they're more friendly to the idea of saving such things based on their rhetoric. I've written to the president 3 times, not like he's going to respond, but if enough people can go to Defend Arlington and look at what they can do, giving money is one thing, because the legal bills have been in the hundreds, I believe, of thousands, at least over 100,000. But everybody's raised money, and they've really paid their legal bill down heavily, which is amazing to me. I was surprised, actually, when I heard how low the debt is now. But I've raised about, through the help of my friends, actually, I've organized things to raise about $5,000. And I'm doing an event here, April 26th, called the Rebelicious Rendezvous. And it's a speaker series, and we're raising money to pay for the legal defense to get the monument back up. Okay. I'm done. I promise I'm done.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, Robert, we want to thank you for coming on the channel here and talking to the folks and letting everybody know what's on your mind and sharing all these stories with us. I really appreciate your time, for sure. Thank you, Charlie. When I heard the name Charlie Watts, I'm a big fan of the Rolling Stones, and I was like, that's really interesting. But I appreciate your show, and I'm glad to share some stories with you. I have quite a few more. Yes, sir. Well, we'll probably have to have you back on to start telling some of those. So. All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, thank you, Robert. All right, bye-bye. Bye. Now, I couldn't think of a better place to end this video than right here in the middle of the woods, the Battle of the Wilderness, at the hotly contested Brocken Plank Road, Orange Plank Road. Not too far in that direction, Longstreet's wounded. Right here where I'm at right now is a place where men like Wadsworth and Hayes end up losing their lives. Families lose loved ones. Soldiers burned to death in these fields around me here. If you'll let these fields do it, they'll touch your soul.